She was the Omega slave, but the Alpha King froze when he caught her scent. Mate. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story. The scent of ash and iron filled the air long before the screams began. Aveline Ashbourne had known suffering intimately, like a constant companion that whispered in her ear during sleepless nights. Her fingers, raw and bleeding from years of labor, trembled as she scrubbed the stone floor of the pack-house kitchen. The pale blue dress she wore, threadbare and stained, had once belonged to someone else, someone who mattered. But Aveline was an Omega, and in the Shadowpine Pack, Omegas were less than nothing. They were tools, objects to be used and discarded, their humanity stripped away with each passing season. The silver collar around her neck burned with a dull, constant ache. It suppressed her wolf, kept her weak, kept her compliant. She had worn it for so long that she could barely remember what freedom felt like, what it meant to run beneath the moon with wind in her hair and wildness in her heart. The water in her bucket rippled suddenly, concentric circles spreading outward like a warning. Aveline's breath caught in her throat. She lifted her head, her auburn hair falling across her hollow cheeks, and listened. In the distance, beyond the walls of her prison, something was coming. The earth itself seemed to tremble, as if the world knew that everything was about to change. The first howl split the night like a blade through silk. Then came the others, a chorus of power and fury that made the walls shake and the windows rattle in their frames. Aveline dropped her scrub brush, her heart hammering against her ribs. She knew those howls. Every wolf knew the sound of war when it came calling. The Shadowpine Pack was under attack. Bodies rushed past her, warriors scrambling to defend their territory, but no one spared her a glance. She was invisible, forgotten, a ghost haunting the edges of their world. Aveline pressed herself against the wall, making herself smaller, trying to disappear entirely. Violence had always found her eventually, no matter how quiet she tried to be. The sounds of battle erupted outside, snarls and screams, the tearing of flesh, the breaking of bones. The metallic tang of blood began to seep through the cracks in the walls, and Aveline's suppressed wolf whimpered deep inside her, desperate to emerge, desperate to survive. She ran. Her bare feet slapped against cold stone as she fled through the servants' corridors, past the empty rooms where she had cleaned and scrubbed and bled for people who saw her as nothing. The building shook with the force of bodies colliding, walls cracking under supernatural strength. Somewhere above her, the ceiling collapsed with a deafening roar. Aveline burst through a side door and into the night. The chaos was everywhere. Wolves, massive and terrible in their fury, tore through the Shadowpine warriors with brutal efficiency. These were not ordinary wolves. Even through her fear, Aveline could sense their power, could feel it rolling off them in waves that made her knees weak. This was an Alpha's pack, disciplined and deadly, moving with a coordination that spoke of absolute loyalty and unbreakable bonds. She needed to hide. She needed to survive. Aveline stumbled toward the tree line, her lungs burning, her vision blurring with tears and terror. The forest had always been forbidden to her, but nothing mattered now except escape. Her dress caught on branches as she plunged into the darkness between the trees, thorns tearing at her skin, roots threatening to trip her with every desperate step. Behind her, the sounds of battle began to fade, replaced by an eerie silence that was somehow worse. They had won. The attacking pack had won. Aveline collapsed against a tree, her chest heaving, her whole body shaking with exhaustion and fear. She pressed her hand against the rough bark, trying to ground herself, trying to remember how to breathe. Blood trickled down her arms from dozens of small cuts, and her feet screamed with pain. That was when she felt it. A presence, vast and overwhelming, like standing before an ocean and realizing how small you truly are. The air itself seemed to thicken, charged with an energy that made every hair on her body stand on end. Aveline's wolf, even suppressed and chained, suddenly surged forward with a desperation she had never felt before. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving through the forest toward her. She couldn't move. Terror and something else, something she didn't understand, rooted her to the spot. Her hands gripped the tree behind her as if it could anchor her to reality, keep her from being swept away by whatever was coming. He emerged from the shadows like a legend given form. Tall, powerfully built, with golden hair that fell past his shoulders and caught the moonlight like spun silver. A short beard framed a face that was both beautiful and terrifying, angular and sharp with the marks of countless battles. His eyes, when they found her, were the color of amber fire, glowing with an inner light that spoke of ancient bloodlines and untamed power. Azeron Mooncrest. Even in her isolation, Aveline had heard the name whispered with fear and awe. The Alpha King of the Northern Territories, ruler of the Mooncrest Alliance, the most powerful werewolf in 100 generations. He conquered packs the way other men collected stones, expanding his empire with calculated precision and overwhelming force. And he was walking toward her. Aveline wanted to run, wanted to scream, wanted to do anything except stand there frozen like prey before a predator. But her body wouldn't obey. She could only watch as he approached, each step measured, his gaze locked on her with an intensity that burned. He stopped 10 feet away. Then the wind shifted. Aveline watched as Azeron Mooncrest, the unconquerable Alpha King, went absolutely still. His entire body tensed, muscles coiling like springs about to snap. His eyes widened, the amber glow intensifying until it seemed to illuminate the entire forest. His nostrils flared as he drew in a deep breath, and something fundamental changed in his expression. His lips parted, and a single word escaped, rough and reverent, and absolutely certain. Mate. The world tilted. Aveline's legs gave out, and she slid down the tree trunk, her mind unable to process what she had just heard. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be possible. She was an Omega slave, worthless and broken, wearing a collar that marked her as property. Alpha Kings didn't have Omega mates. They had powerful Luna Queens, women of status and strength who could stand beside them and rule. But Azeron was moving again, closing the distance between them with swift, predatory grace. He dropped to his knees in front of her, and up close, he was even more overwhelming. The scent of him crashed over her like a wave. Pine and winter storms and something wild and clean that made her suppressed wolf howl with recognition. You, he breathed, his voice deep and rough with emotion. It's you. His hand reached out, hovering inches from her face, trembling slightly. For a moment, he looked almost afraid to touch her, as if she might shatter like glass beneath his fingers. Then, with infinite gentleness, he cupped her cheek, and Aveline gasped at the contact. It was electric. It was lightning in her veins, and fire in her bones, and every impossible thing she had never dared to dream. The mate bond, even through the silver collar's suppression, roared to life with a force that stole her breath. She could feel him, feel the vastness of his soul, the depth of his loneliness, the fierce protective instinct that surged through him the moment their skin met. Please, she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. Please don't hurt me. Something broke in his expression. Pain, raw and unexpected, flashed through those amber eyes. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone with devastating tenderness. Never, Azeron said, and it sounded like a vow. I would burn the world before I let anyone hurt you again. Tears spilled down Aveline's cheeks. She didn't understand what was happening. She didn't understand how the most powerful alpha in existence could be looking at her, a broken slave in a tattered dress, as if she was precious, as if she was everything. The collar, he growled, his gaze dropping to the silver band around her neck. Fury rolled off him in palpable waves. They collared you. They dared to collar my mate." He stood abruptly, pulling her up with him, his arms supporting her weight as if she weighed nothing. Aveline swayed against him, overwhelmed by his proximity, by the heat radiating from his body, by the way her wolf was going wild inside her despite the silver's suppression. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice gentler now, though anger still simmered beneath the surface. "Aveline," she managed. "Aveline Ashbourne." "Aveline." He repeated her name like a prayer, like something sacred. "I am Azeron Mooncrest, and you are my mate, my Luna, my queen. Everything I have, everything I am, belongs to you from this moment forward." The declaration should have been ridiculous. They had known each other for mere minutes. But the mate bond didn't care about time or logic or any of the rules that governed ordinary lives. It was ancient magic, destiny written in the stars, and Aveline could feel its truth resonating in every cell of her body. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I'm just an omega. I'm nothing." "You are everything," Azeron corrected fiercely, "and anyone who made you believe otherwise will answer to me." He lifted her into his arms as if she were made of porcelain, cradling her against his chest. Aveline's hands instinctively clutched at his shirt, the fabric rough beneath her damaged fingers. She could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady, a rhythm that called to something deep inside her. "The battle?" she asked weakly. "Over. The Shadowpine pack has fallen. Their alpha is dead. Their warriors defeated or scattered." His voice was matter of fact, but she could feel the controlled violence in him, the predator that lurked beneath the careful restraint. "You're safe now, Aveline. I promise you, you're safe. Safe." The word was foreign, a concept she had abandoned so long ago that hearing it felt like listening to a language she no longer spoke. But wrapped in his arms, breathing in his scent, feeling the absolute certainty radiating from him, she almost believed it might be true. Azeron carried her back toward what remained of the pack house. Warriors, his warriors, bowed their heads respectfully as they passed. She could feel their curious stares, sense their shock at seeing their Alpha King carrying a ragged Omega slave as if she were made of gold. "Kale," Azeron called out, his voice commanding. A tall man with dark hair and calculating gray eyes approached. His aura marked him as a beta, powerful in his own right, second only to an alpha. He took one look at Aveline in Azeron's arms and his eyebrows rose slightly. "My king?" he questioned, his tone carefully neutral. "This is Aveline Ashbourne," Azeron announced, and there was steel in his voice, a warning and a challenge combined. "My mate, your Luna Queen." The silence that followed was absolute. Kale's eyes widened fractionally before he schooled his expression into one of respect. He dropped to one knee, his fist over his heart. Around them, other warriors followed suit, a ripple of acknowledgement spreading through the assembled pack. "Luna Queen," Kale said formally. "We are honored." Aveline couldn't speak, couldn't process what was happening. Hours ago, she had been scrubbing floors, invisible and worthless. Now she was being called a queen. Wolves were kneeling before her, and the most powerful alpha in existence was holding her, as if she might disappear if he let go. "Get a healer," Azeron ordered. "Now. And bring me silver cutting tools. That collar comes off tonight." "The suppression will break," Kyle warned quietly. "If her wolf has been bound for years, the release could be violent." "I know." Azeron's arms tightened around Aveline protectively. "I'll be here. I'll help her through it." They moved through the ruins of the pack house to what must have been the Alpha's chambers. The room was large, dominated by a massive bed, but Azeron carried her to a chair instead, settling her gently before kneeling in front of her once more. "Aveline," he said softly, claiming her attention. "I need you to look at me." She raised her eyes to his, and the impact of that golden gaze stole her breath all over again. When we remove the collar, your wolf will be free. After years of suppression, that freedom might be overwhelming. You might shift involuntarily. You might feel pain or rage or joy so intense it frightens you. His hands found hers, engulfing them completely. But I will be right here. I won't leave you. My wolf and I will help you through every moment. Do you understand? She nodded shakily. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. I know you're mine, he said simply. I know that the moon herself chose you for me. I know that I have searched for you across decades and countless miles. And now that I've found you, nothing in this world or any other will separate us. A healer arrived, an elderly woman with kind eyes and gentle hands. She examined Aveline with practiced efficiency, her expression growing darker with each new discovery, the scars, the malnutrition, the signs of prolonged abuse and neglect. Luna, the healer said quietly, compassion thick in her voice. You have survived what would have broken most. You are stronger than you know. Aveline didn't feel strong. She felt like a single thread pulled too tight, about to snap. Kale returned with tools designed to cut through silver, and Azeron took them with steady hands. He positioned himself behind Aveline's chair, his presence warm and solid at her back. This might hurt, he warned. The silver has likely bonded with your skin, but it will be brief, and then you'll be free. Do it, Aveline whispered. She was tired of being afraid, tired of being chained. The first cut of the silver sent fire racing through her nerves. She gasped, her fingers digging into the arms of the chair. Behind her, Azeron began to speak in a language she didn't recognize, ancient words that seemed to resonate with power. His free hand settled on her shoulder, and she felt his strength flowing into her, steadying her, holding her together. The collar fell away with a soft click. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the world exploded. Power surged through Aveline's body like a dam bursting after years of pressure. Her wolf, freed from its prison, erupted to the surface with a howl of triumph and rage. Aveline screamed as her body began to shift involuntarily, bones cracking and reforming, muscles tearing and rebuilding. But Azeron's arms were around her, his voice in her ear, steady and commanding. I've got you, he murmured. Let it happen. Don't fight it. I'm right here, Aveline. You're not alone. His own power rose to meet hers, alpha to omega, and instead of overwhelming her, it guided her. He showed her wolf how to control the shift, how to channel the wild energy into something manageable. His presence was an anchor in the chaos, unshakable and sure. When the shifting finally stopped, Aveline found herself on hands and knees, gasping for breath. But she was still human, still herself. She had maintained control, something she never could have done alone. Azeron knelt beside her, his hand gentle on her back. Breathe, little wolf. You did perfectly. Aveline looked up at him through tangled auburn hair, and for the first time in years, she felt her wolf clearly. Felt its strength, its wildness, its absolute certainty that this male was theirs, their mate, their forever. I can feel her, she whispered in wonder. My wolf. She's there. She's really there. Pride and something deeper shone in Azeron's eyes. She never left you. She was just waiting. The healer approached again, this time with warm water and clean cloths. Let me tend to your wounds, Luna. Over the next hour, Aveline was cleaned and treated, her cuts bandaged, her exhaustion addressed with food and water. Azeron never left her side, his presence constant and comforting. He held her hand while the healer worked, his thumb tracing idle patterns on her skin, the simple touch grounding her in reality. When the healer finally left, satisfied that Aveline would recover, Azeron carried her to the bed despite her weak protests. "You need rest," he said firmly. "Real rest, in a real bed, without fear." "Where will you sleep?" Aveline asked, suddenly anxious at the thought of him leaving. Something soft and vulnerable crossed his features. "May I stay? I can sleep in the chair. I just need to be near you to know you're safe." The idea of being alone terrified her more than she wanted to admit. "Stay," she whispered. "Please." Azeron settled into the chair beside the bed, close enough that she could reach out and touch him if she needed to. The room was dark, except for moonlight streaming through the windows, painting everything in silver and shadow. "Azeron?" Aveline's voice was small in the darkness. "Yes, little wolf?" "Tell me about you, about your pack, about the world I'm apparently going to be part of." She heard him shift, could imagine him leaning back, considering his words. "The Mooncrest Alliance is vast," he began, his deep voice perfect for storytelling. "It spans the northern territories, from the Frost Mountains to the Whispering Seas. We are not just one pack, but many, united under a single banner. I became Alpha King when I was barely 20, inheriting a kingdom on the brink of civil war." "What happened?" Aveline asked, drawn in despite her exhaustion. "I ended the war. Not with more violence, but with honor and justice. I challenged the corrupt alphas who were tearing us apart, defeated them, and offered their packs a choice: serve under fair rule or leave peacefully. Most chose to stay." He paused. "I have spent decades building something better, something worth protecting. A kingdom where strength is valued, but so is mercy, where wolves can live without fear of tyrants." "And now you have an Omega mate," Aveline said quietly. "Does that complicate things?" "You are not a complication, Aveline. You are the answer to a question I didn't know how to ask." His voice roughened with emotion. "I have been alone in ways that have nothing to do with being surrounded by people. Leadership is isolating. Power is lonely. I have worn my crown with pride, but there have been nights when the weight of it felt unbearable." Aveline understood that loneliness more than he could know. "The moon pairs mates perfectly," Azeron continued. "She doesn't make mistakes. If she chose you for me, it's because you are exactly what I need, and I am exactly what you need. Your rank as an Omega means nothing compared to the truth that you are mine, and I am yours." "I'm afraid," Aveline admitted. "I don't know how to be a queen. I don't know how to be anything except what I was." "Then we'll learn together," Azeron said gently. "I don't expect you to transform overnight. I don't expect you to be anything except yourself. But I do promise that I will protect you, cherish you, and stand beside you as you discover who you were always meant to be." Tears slid silently down Aveline's cheeks, but for the first time in years, they weren't tears of pain. "Sleep now," Azeron murmured. "Tomorrow begins your new life, but tonight, just rest. You're safe, Aveline. I promise you're safe." She closed her eyes, his words wrapping around her like a blanket. Somewhere between one breath and the next, exhaustion claimed her, pulling her down into the first peaceful sleep she'd had in years. But even in sleep, she remained aware of him, the steady presence of her mate watching over her, keeping the darkness at bay. Aveline woke to sunlight and the smell of pine. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The attack, the mate bond, Azeron. She sat up quickly, her heart racing, and found him exactly where he'd promised to be. Azeron was in the chair beside the bed, but he wasn't asleep. His amber eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. In the morning light, he was even more striking, all gold and power, and barely contained strength. "How long have you been watching me?" Aveline asked, her voice still rough from sleep. "A few hours," he admitted without shame. "I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept thinking this might be a dream, that I might wake and you'd be gone. The vulnerability in his confession made something warm unfurl in her chest. This powerful alpha king, feared across territories, was afraid of losing her. "I'm real," she said softly. "I'm here. I can see that." A small smile curved his lips. "How do you feel?" Aveline took inventory. Her body ached, but it was the ache of healing rather than fresh wounds. Her wolf stirred inside her, stretching like a creature waking from hibernation. And the mate bond. Oh, the bond thrummed between them like a living thing, connecting her to Azeron in ways that defied explanation. "Different," she answered honestly. "Free." "Good." He stood, moving to the bed, and held out his hand. "Come. Let me show you what freedom truly looks like." Aveline hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. He pulled her gently to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. Someone had left fresh clothes during the night, a simple but clean dress in deep blue, soft and well-made. Nothing like the rags she'd worn before. "I'll give you privacy to change," Azeron said, already moving toward the door. "Take your time. I'll be just outside." After he left, Aveline changed quickly, marveling at the feel of clean fabric against her skin. When she emerged, Azeron was waiting, and his eyes darkened with appreciation as they swept over her. "Beautiful," he murmured, offering his arm. They walked through the pack house, which looked different in daylight. Warriors were already working to repair the damage from the battle, moving with efficiency and purpose. As Azeron and Aveline passed, every wolf stopped to bow their heads in respect. It was overwhelming, being the center of such attention, but Azeron's presence beside her kept her grounded. They stepped outside into a world transformed by morning light. The forest that had seemed so menacing in darkness was now green and alive, birds singing in the branches. Azeron led her away from the buildings, toward a clearing where a small stream bubbled over smooth stones. "This," he said, gesturing to the landscape, "is your kingdom now. Every tree, every stone, every wolf who runs beneath these skies owes you their loyalty and protection." Aveline shook her head. "I don't know what to do with that." "You don't have to know yet." Azeron turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Aveline, I need you to understand something. The mate bond is powerful, but it's not a cage. You are free to choose. If this life isn't what you want, if I'm not what you want, you can walk away." The offer shocked her. "You would let me go?" "It would destroy me," he admitted, his voice rough. "But your happiness, your choice, matters more than my desires. I want you to stay because you want to, not because you feel trapped by fate." Aveline stared at him, at this powerful male offering her a freedom she'd never imagined possessing. Then she thought about the alternative, returning to a life of servitude and pain, forever wondering what might have been. "I'm terrified," she confessed. "I'm terrified of failing, of not being enough, of letting you down." "Then we'll be terrified together," Azeron said, "and we'll figure it out as we go." She looked into his amber eyes and saw sincerity there, saw patience and understanding, and a devotion that took her breath away. Her wolf surged forward, absolutely certain of what she wanted. "I choose to stay," Aveline whispered. "I choose you." The smile that broke across Azeron's face was radiant, transforming him from intimidating king to something younger, happier, almost boyish in his joy. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Aveline buried her face in his chest, breathing him in. "Thank you," he murmured against her hair. "Thank you for taking a chance on us." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other, the mate bond singing between them. Then Azeron pulled back slightly, his expression turning serious. "There's something I need to tell you. Something you deserve to know before we go any further. Dread coiled in Aveline's stomach. What is it? The Shadowpine Pact didn't fall by accident. I've been planning this attack for months. His jaw clenched. Their alpha was a tyrant who dealt in slave trade, torture, and worse. I've been gathering evidence, building a case to justify his removal. But last night, when we attacked, I wasn't thinking about justice or politics. I was thinking about territory, about expanding my kingdom. He cupped her face gently. Then I found you, and everything changed. I realized the moon had guided me here for a reason. Not to conquer, but to save. To find my mate. Aveline processed this. You're saying you were meant to find me? I believe so. I've attacked and absorbed dozens of packs over the years, but I've never personally participated in a raid. I always send my commanders. Last night, something told me I needed to be here, and I listened. His thumb brushed her cheek. The moon works in mysterious ways, but she always has a purpose. What happens now? Aveline asked. To the surviving Shadowpine wolves? Those who were complicit in the Alpha's crimes will face justice. Those who were innocent, or who were themselves victims, will be offered a place in my pack. His eyes searched hers. Including you, if you wish it. Or you can be exempt from pack politics entirely, as my mate. The choice is yours. So many choices. After a lifetime of having none, the abundance was dizzying. I want to help, Aveline decided. The Omega slaves, the ones like me, I want to make sure they're cared for. That they're freed. Pride shone in Azeron's expression. Then you shall. We'll work together to ensure no one else suffers as you did. A sound in the trees made them both turn. Cale emerged from the forest, his expression carefully neutral, though Aveline could sense tension in his posture. My king, my Luna, he greeted with a slight bow. Forgive the interruption, but there's a situation that requires your attention. Azeron's hand found the small of Aveline's back, a protective gesture. What situation? Some of the Shadowpine wolves are demanding an audience. They wish to challenge the legitimacy of your claim to their territory. Cale's eyes flicked to Aveline. And they wish to challenge the Luna's right to her position. Aveline felt ice slide down her spine. Of course. She'd been foolish to think this would be easy, that wolves would simply accept an Omega slave as their queen. But Azeron's expression darkened with fury. They dare? They claim the right of traditional challenge, Cale continued. They want proof that the Luna is worthy of her position. She doesn't need to prove anything to anyone, Azeron growled. Let them challenge me, Aveline said quietly. Both males turned to stare at her. Aveline, no, Azeron began, but she cut him off. I have to face this eventually. Better now, when I'm prepared, than later when I'm expected to lead without question. She met his gaze steadily. I'm not asking your permission. I'm telling you what I need to do. Something shifted in Azeron's expression, respect mingling with concern. If you face them, I cannot interfere. Challenge law is ancient and absolute. You would stand alone. Then I'll stand alone, Aveline said with more confidence than she felt. But I won't run from this. Azeron stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. But you need to know what you're facing. Traditional challenge for a Luna's position typically involves 3 trials: strength, wisdom, and heart. You'll be tested in all 3. I'm stronger than I look, Aveline said. I know you are. Azeron's hand came up to cup her cheek. You've survived years of torment that would have killed most wolves. That takes a strength that has nothing to do with physical power. When does this happen? Aveline asked Kyle. They're demanding it occur today, at sunset, the beta replied. They claim the longer we wait, the more it looks like weakness. Fine. Sunset. Aveline straightened her shoulders. I'll be ready. Kale bowed and departed, leaving Aveline and Azeron alone once more. The Alpha King was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What? She asked. You continue to surprise me, he said softly. Most newly mated wolves would hide behind their mate's strength, but not you. You're willing to stand and fight for what's yours. You said I was your queen, Aveline reminded him. Queens don't hide. A slow, fierce smile spread across Azeron's face. No, they don't. He spent the rest of the day preparing her. Not with weapons or combat training, there wasn't time for that, but with knowledge. He told her about pack politics, about the history of the challenge tradition, about the kinds of tests she might face. He also told her about the wolves who would be judging her, their names and backgrounds, their strengths and prejudices. Remember, Azeron said, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, strength comes in many forms. You don't have to be the strongest fighter or the cleverest strategist. You just have to be yourself, and trust that the moon knew what she was doing when she made us mates. Aveline nodded, trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach. They walked together to the central gathering space, where wolves from both packs had assembled. The crowd parted for them, creating a path to the center where 3 elderly wolves waited. These were the elders, the ones who would oversee the challenge. The lead elder, a woman with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice, studied Aveline with open skepticism. You are Aveline Ashbourne? She asked, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. I am. And you claim the right to stand as Luna Queen beside Alpha King Azeron Mooncrest? I do. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Aveline could feel their doubt, their disbelief that an Omega could possibly be worthy of such a position. Then you will face the traditional challenge, the elder declared. 3 trials to prove your worth. Do you accept? I accept. Very well. The first trial is strength. You will face an opponent in single combat. Not to the death, but to submission. Win, and you pass. Lose, and you forfeit your claim. A figure stepped forward from the crowd, and Aveline's heart sank. It was a female warrior, tall and muscular, moving with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. This was no ordinary fighter. This was a beta-level wolf, powerful and experienced. This is Mira, the elder announced. She volunteers to test your strength. Azeron's hand tightened on Aveline's shoulder. She could feel his wolf raging, desperate to intervene, but he held himself back. This was her trial, her choice. Aveline stepped into the center ring, facing Mira across 10 feet of trampled earth. The warrior smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Nothing personal, Omega, Mira said. But you're not fit to lead us. Then prove it, Aveline replied, with a courage she didn't feel. The elder raised her hand. Begin. Mira lunged forward with blinding speed. Aveline barely managed to dodge, her newly freed wolf instincts screaming warnings. She rolled to the side, came up on her feet, but Mira was already there, her fist connecting with Aveline's ribs. Pain exploded through her chest. Aveline gasped, stumbling back, and Mira pressed her advantage. A kick caught Aveline in the stomach, driving the air from her lungs. She hit the ground hard, tasting blood. This was it. This was how it ended. She wasn't strong enough. She had never been strong enough. But then, through the pain and fear, Aveline felt something else. The mate bond, pulsing with Azeron's absolute faith in her. She could feel him, feel his certainty, feel his wolf howling its support. And beneath that, her own wolf, angry and defiant, refusing to give up. She had survived years of abuse. She had endured things that would have broken most wolves. And she was still here, still fighting, still breathing. Mira came in for another attack, confident in her victory. But this time, Aveline didn't dodge. She moved forward, inside Mira's guard, using the warrior's momentum against her. Years of watching fights, of learning to predict violence to avoid it, suddenly had a different purpose. Aveline's fist connected with Mira's solar plexus. The warrior's eyes widened in shock, air rushing from her lungs. Before she could recover, Aveline swept her legs, sending her crashing to the ground. Then Aveline was on top of her, one hand pressed to Mira's throat, not squeezing, but there, a clear message. Submit, or this continues. For a heartbeat, Mira struggled. Then, slowly, she tilted her head back, exposing her throat in the ultimate sign of submission. "I yield," Mira gasped. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Aveline stood, offering her hand to help Mira up. The warrior took it, her expression transformed from contempt to grudging respect. "Well fought," Mira said quietly. "Perhaps there's more to you than I thought." Aveline turned to face the elders, her chest heaving, blood trickling from her split lip. "Is that sufficient proof of strength?" The lead elder's expression had shifted from skepticism to something that might have been approval. "The first trial is past. You have proven you can fight for your position." Aveline swayed slightly, and suddenly Azeron was there, supporting her, his eyes blazing with fierce pride. "You were magnificent," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "One down," Aveline whispered back. "Two to go." The elder allowed them a brief respite while the next trial was prepared. Azeron led Aveline to the side, checking her injuries with gentle hands. "I'm fine," she assured him, though her ribs screamed in protest. "You're hurt," he countered, his jaw tight. "Let me heal you." "I need to do this on my own," Aveline said. "No special treatment. No alpha powers making it easier." Azeron looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded. "As you wish. But the moment this is over, I'm healing every scratch." The second trial was called forth. This time it was a test of wisdom. The elders presented Aveline with a scenario, a hypothetical situation involving pack politics and conflicting loyalties. She was expected to propose a solution that balanced justice with mercy, strength with compassion. Aveline listened carefully to the details, her mind racing. She thought about what she'd learned from Azeron, about his approach to leadership. But more than that, she thought about her own experiences, about what she would have wanted when she was powerless and afraid. Her answer, when it came, was simple but profound. She spoke of the importance of hearing all voices, not just the powerful ones. She talked about creating systems where the weakest members of a pack could seek justice without fear of retribution. She proposed councils that included representatives from all ranks, ensuring that decisions reflected the needs of everyone, not just the elite. When she finished, silence reigned. Then the elders began to nod, one by one. "The second trial is past," the lead elder declared. "You have proven you possess wisdom beyond your years." Two down, one to go. The final trial was the trial of heart. This, the elders explained, was the most important. Aluna must have the capacity for love, for empathy, for putting the needs of the pack above her own desires. "For this trial," the elder said, "we will present you with a choice. Choose wisely, for your decision will reveal your true character." Two wolves were brought forward. One was a young mother, her pup clinging to her leg, both bearing the marks of abuse. The other was an elderly male, scarred and worn, his eyes dim with pain. "Both of these wolves are dying," the elder explained. "The mother has a wasting disease that will claim her within days. The elder has injuries that will take him before the week ends. We have only enough healing magic for one. You must choose who lives and who dies." Aveline's blood ran cold. This was impossible. How could she choose? How could anyone choose? She looked at the mother, saw the desperate hope in her eyes, the way she held her child close. Then she looked at the elder, saw acceptance there, but also a weariness with life's cruelty. Aveline stepped forward, approaching both wolves. She knelt before the mother first. "If I save you, what happens to your child when you're gone? Who will care for them?" The mother's eyes filled with tears. "I have no one. That's why I need more time." Then Aveline turned to the elder. "And you? What would you do with more time?" The old wolf's laugh was bitter. "Nothing. I'm tired. I've lived long enough." Aveline stood, turning to face the elders. "I refuse this choice." Gasps echoed through the crowd. The lead elder's eyes narrowed. "That is not an option. You must choose." "No," Aveline said firmly. "This isn't a test of heart. It's a test of cruelty. A true Luna wouldn't choose who lives based on arbitrary rules. She would find another way." She looked at Azeron, saw understanding dawning in his eyes. "Use my life force," Aveline said to the elders. "Take what you need from me to heal them both. I'm young. I can recover. They can't." "Aveline, no!" Azeron started forward, but Kale held him back. Challenge law prevented interference even now. The lead elder studied Aveline for a long moment. Then, incredibly, she smiled. "There is no wasting disease," she revealed. "There are no fatal injuries. This was a test to see if you would sacrifice yourself for others, and you passed." Relief and anger warred in Aveline's chest. "That was cruel. Leadership is often cruel," the elder replied, "but you faced it with grace and selflessness. The third trial is past." The elder turned to address the assembled crowd. "Aveline Ashbourne has proven herself worthy in strength, wisdom, and heart. She has earned the right to stand as Luna Queen beside Alpha King Azeron Mooncrest. Does anyone challenge this judgment?" Silence answered her. "Then let it be known across all territories. Aveline Ashbourne is Luna Queen, now and forever. So say the elders. So say the pack." "So say the pack," the crowd echoed, and this time their voices held respect, even awe. Azeron finally reached Aveline, pulling her into his arms, his whole body shaking with relief and pride and overwhelming emotion. "You terrify me," he whispered into her hair. "Offering your life like that. Don't ever do that again." "I had to," Aveline replied. "I had to prove I was worthy, not just to them, but to myself." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You are the most extraordinary creature I've ever known." "I'm just me," Aveline said. "Exactly." That night, there was a ceremony. Formal and ancient, it bound Aveline to Azeron not just as mates but as co-rulers. She stood before the assembled packs, wearing a dress of silver and moonlight that someone had produced, and listened as vows were spoken in the old tongue. When it came time for her to speak, her voice rang out clear and strong. "I accept this position not because I sought power, but because the moon chose me. I promise to serve with wisdom and compassion, to hear the voices of the powerless, and to stand beside my mate as we build something better together." Azeron's vows were equally moving, his deep voice filled with reverence as he pledged his life, his strength, and his heart to her. When the ceremony ended, they were officially bonded, officially crowned, officially united in the eyes of all wolves. But the moment that mattered most came later, when they were finally alone. Azeron led Aveline back to their chambers, his hand never leaving hers. Once the door closed behind them, the formal masks fell away, leaving only two people who had found each other against impossible odds. "I have something for you," Azeron said, moving to a chest in the corner. He returned with a small velvet box. Inside was a necklace, delicate silver chains woven together to form a crescent moon. Where the collar had once bound her, this would rest freely, a symbol of choice rather than captivity. "To replace what was taken," Azeron explained, his voice rough. "You never have to wear it if you don't want to, but I wanted you to have the option." Aveline's fingers trembled as she lifted the necklace. "It's beautiful." "May I?" Azeron asked, and she nodded. He fastened it around her neck with infinite care, his fingers lingering on her skin. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with emotion. "Aveline," he breathed. "My mate, my Luna, my everything." She turned to face him fully, her heart pounding. The mate bond thrummed between them, calling them together, begging for completion. They had been so careful, so restrained, giving her time to adjust. But Aveline was done being careful. "Azeron," she whispered, stepping closer. "I'm ready. I want this. I want you." His control snapped. Azeron captured her mouth in a kiss that was equal parts desperate and reverent. Aveline melted into him, her arms winding around his neck, her body molding to his. The mate bond sang in triumph, finally allowed to fully manifest. They moved together to the bed, a tangle of limbs and whispered promises. Azeron worshipped every inch of her, his touch gentle despite the wild need she could feel coursing through him. He traced the scars she bore, kissing each one, silently vowing that she would never hurt again. When they finally came together, it was like coming home. Two broken pieces finding their perfect fit, two lonely souls finally, blissfully whole. The bond completed with a force that stole their breath, connecting them on every level, mind, body, heart, and soul. Afterward, they lay tangled together, hearts still racing, the world beyond their room temporarily forgotten. "I love you," Azeron murmured, his lips against her temple. "I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. But I love you with everything I am." "I love you too," Aveline whispered back, and it was the truest thing she'd ever said. They fell asleep wrapped in each other, the mate bond humming contentedly between them, a connection that would last for all their days. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change. Aveline threw herself into her new role with determination, working with Azeron to restructure pack hierarchy. They created councils, established laws protecting the vulnerable, and made it clear that slavery and abuse would not be tolerated anywhere in their territories. The Omega slaves from the Shadowpine Pack were freed, given homes and education, helped to rebuild their lives. Aveline worked with each one personally, understanding their trauma in a way no one else could. She became their champion, their voice, their proof that survival was possible. But it wasn't easy. There were wolves who resented the changes, who saw Aveline as weak despite her trials. There were attempts to undermine her authority, whispered rumors and subtle challenges. Azeron dealt with most of these, his wrath swift and absolute when anyone dared disrespect his mate. But Aveline learned to stand on her own as well, learned to project the authority that came with her position. She also discovered strengths she hadn't known she possessed. Her experiences had given her insight into suffering, but also into resilience. She could spot wolves who were struggling, who were hiding pain, and she made it her mission to help them. Slowly, the pack began to change. The culture of fear and domination that had ruled for so long gave way to something healthier. Wolves began to understand that strength didn't mean cruelty, that power could be used to protect rather than oppress. And through it all, Azeron was beside her, her partner, her protector, her mate in every sense of the word. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's fears and dreams. They argued and made up, pushed each other to be better, and celebrated each victory together. 6 months after that fateful night, Aveline stood on a balcony overlooking their kingdom, Azeron's arms wrapped around her from behind. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Happy?" he murmured against her ear. "More than I ever thought possible," Aveline admitted. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real, that you're real." "I'm real," Azeron assured her. "And I'm yours, always." "There's something I need to tell you," Aveline said, turning in his arms to face him. Concern flickered across his features. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant." The world seemed to stop. Azeron's eyes widened, his mouth falling open in shock. Then joy, pure and radiant, transformed his face. "You're certain?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "The healer confirmed it this morning. We're going to have a pup." Azeron's knees actually buckled. He sank down, his arms still around her, his face pressed to her stomach. "A pup," he whispered. "Our pup. Aveline, you've given me everything. A mate, a true partner, and now this. How did I get so lucky?" "I think we both got lucky," Aveline said, running her fingers through his golden hair. The moon knew what she was doing after all. They stayed like that as the sun set, the Alpha King and his Luna Queen, holding each other and the precious new life they'd created together. But peace never lasts forever. 3 months later, word reached them of a threat rising in the south. A rogue Alpha, jealous of Azeron's power and resentful of his reforms, was gathering an army. He called himself Dakan the Black, and he preached a return to the old ways, to domination and slavery, and the rule of the strong over the weak. "He's coming for us," Kale reported during a council meeting. "He's declared that Azeron's reign has made us soft, that having an Omega Luna is an insult to all wolves. He's vowed to destroy the Mooncrest Alliance and everything we've built." Aveline felt cold dread settle in her stomach. She was 5 months pregnant now, her belly swollen with their growing pup. The thought of war, of violence touching her child, was unbearable. But Azeron's hand found hers under the table, squeezing reassuringly. "Let him come," the Alpha King said, his voice hard as stone. "We have not gone soft. We have become stronger through unity and justice. And if Dakan wants to test that strength, he will find himself sorely disappointed." Preparations for war began immediately. Warriors trained, supplies were gathered, alliances were reinforced. Aveline wanted to help, but Azeron was insistent that she stay far from any fighting. "You're carrying our child," he said firmly. "I won't risk you." "And what happens if you lose?" Aveline challenged. "What happens to me and our pup then?" "I won't lose." But there was fear in his eyes, fear she understood all too well. The night before Azeron was set to lead his army south, they lay together in the darkness, neither able to sleep. "Promise me you'll come back," Aveline whispered. "I can't," Azeron said honestly. "War is unpredictable. But I can promise that I will fight with everything I have to return to you and our pup. I should be fighting beside you. You are fighting, Aveline. You're protecting our future. You're carrying the next generation of the Mooncrest line. That's more important than any battle." Aveline turned to face him, studying his features in the moonlight, memorizing every line and curve. "I was nothing before you found me," she said softly. "A slave, invisible, worthless. You saw me when no one else did. You chose me when you could have had anyone. Don't make me go back to a world without you in it." Azeron pulled her close, his hand splaying protectively over her swollen belly. "You were never nothing. You were always extraordinary. I was just lucky enough to find you." He kissed her forehead. "And I'm not going anywhere. Dakan will fall, and I will return to you. That's a promise." He left with the dawn, leading an army of thousands south to face the threat. Aveline watched from the walls, her hand on her belly, her heart breaking and mending with each breath. The days that followed were agony. Reports came back sporadically, tales of fierce battles and heavy losses on both sides. Dakan's army was larger than anticipated, and his warriors fought with the desperation of those who had nothing to lose. Then, 2 weeks after Azeron left, the reports stopped coming. Silence was worse than bad news. Aveline found herself unable to sleep, unable to eat, pacing the halls like a ghost. The mate bond still thrummed faintly, proof that Azeron lived, but she could feel his pain, his exhaustion, his determination. She was in the council room, reviewing maps with Kale, when the bond suddenly flared with agony. Aveline gasped, doubling over, her hands clutching her stomach. Through the bond, she felt everything: Azeron's pain, his rage, the moment a blade pierced his side. She felt him fall, felt his wolf howl in defiance. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no. Luna." Kyle was at her side immediately. "What's wrong? Is it the pup?" "It's Azeron. He's hurt. He's dying." The bond was fading, growing dimmer with each passing second. Aveline could feel him slipping away, could feel the darkness reaching for him, and she realized with absolute clarity that she couldn't let that happen. "I need a horse," Aveline said, straightening despite the pain. "And a small guard. I'm going to him." "Luna, you can't. You're pregnant, and the journey is too dangerous." "He's dying, Kale." Aveline met the beta's eyes. "I can feel it through the bond. If I don't go to him now, I lose him forever, and I refuse to let that happen." Something in her expression must have convinced him, because Kale nodded slowly. "Then I'm coming with you, and we're taking our best warriors." They rode south with desperate speed, Aveline pushing through exhaustion and pain. The bond grew fainter with each mile, and she urged them faster, faster, knowing that every second counted. They found the battlefield 3 days later. It was a nightmare landscape of blood and death. Bodies littered the ground, both Azeron's forces and Dakan's army. The fighting had clearly been brutal, and by all accounts, neither side had truly won. Aveline dismounted clumsily, her swollen belly making movement difficult, and began searching through the carnage. Her wolf howled inside her, desperate to find its mate. Then she saw him. Azeron lay near the center of the battlefield, his golden hair matted with blood, his chest barely rising and falling. Dakan's body was beside him, the rogue alpha's throat torn out, but the victory had cost dearly. "Azeron!" Aveline stumbled toward him, falling to her knees at his side. His eyes fluttered open at her voice, amber depths glazed with pain. "Aveline?" His voice was barely a whisper. "You shouldn't be here. The pup is fine. We're both fine. But you won't be if we don't get you help." She turned to the warriors who had followed her. "Get a healer, now!" But Azeron's hand caught hers weakly. "Too late. The wound is silver poisoned. I can feel it spreading." "No." Aveline shook her head fiercely. "No, you don't get to give up. You promised me you'd come back." "I'm sorry," he breathed. "I'm so sorry, little wolf." The bond was a mere flicker now, fading like a candle in the wind. Aveline could feel him slipping away, could feel death's cold hand reaching for the male she loved more than life itself. Then she remembered something. The trial of heart, when she'd offered her own life force to heal others. "Take from me," Aveline said urgently. "Through the bond. Take my strength, my life force, whatever you need. I'm pregnant. I'm full of life energy. Take it and live." "I can't ask you to do that," Azeron protested weakly. "You're not asking. I'm giving." Aveline pressed her hand to his chest, over his heart, and opened herself fully through the mate bond. "Take what you need. Save yourself. For me. For our pup. For our kingdom." She felt the moment he gave in, felt him begin to draw strength from her through their connection. It was agony and ecstasy combined, her life force flowing into him, mending his wounds, fighting the poison. But Aveline held nothing back, giving everything she had. The world began to gray at the edges. She swayed, exhaustion crushing her. But Azeron was breathing easier. The color was returning to his face. The wound in his side was closing. "Enough," he gasped, trying to pull back. "Aveline, stop. You're killing yourself." "Not yet," she whispered. "Not until you're healed." She poured everything into him until finally, when his eyes were clear and his breathing steady, she collapsed into his arms. "Aveline." Azeron caught her, his newly healed strength holding her upright. "Healers! Someone help her!" But Aveline smiled up at him, reaching up to cup his cheek. "You're alive. That's all that matters." "So are you," he said fiercely. "And you're staying that way. Do you hear me? You're staying with me." Healers surrounded them, working frantically. They stabilized Aveline, gave her potions and herbs, used their magic to restore what she'd sacrificed. The pup, miraculously, was fine, protected by the life force she'd channeled. It took days for both of them to fully recover. Days spent in a makeshift camp on the battlefield, surrounded by their warriors, mourning the dead and celebrating survival. When Aveline finally woke fully, Azeron was there, as he always was. "You terrified me," he said, his voice rough. "Again." "Sorry," she murmured, "but I'd do it again. Every time." "I know. That's what terrifies me." He gathered her close, mindful of her belly. "You saved me, Aveline. You brought me back from death itself. We save each other," she corrected. "That's what mates do." They returned home to a hero's welcome. The war was over, Dakon defeated, and though losses had been heavy, the kingdom had survived. More than survived, it had proven its strength, its unity, its determination to protect what it had built. Aveline's pregnancy continued without complications, and 3 months later, on a night when the moon was full and bright, she gave birth to a daughter. They named her Selene, after the moon goddess who had brought them together. The baby was perfect, with her mother's auburn hair and her father's amber eyes. She was strong and healthy, howling with indignation at being brought into the world, making both parents laugh through their tears. "She's ours," Azeron whispered, holding his daughter with infinite gentleness. "She's really ours." "She's the future," Aveline said, gazing at her child with wonder. "Everything we fought for, everything we built, it's all for her and those who come after." Years passed. Selene grew strong and wild, running through the halls of the palace with a pack of other pups, learning to shift young, showing signs of being as powerful as her father and as compassionate as her mother. 2 more children followed. Twins, a boy named Kieran and a girl named Luna. The kingdom flourished under Azeron and Aveline's rule. The reforms they implemented became standard across all territories. Slavery was abolished entirely. Councils representing all ranks made decisions together. The weak were protected, the powerful held accountable. Aveline never forgot where she came from. She visited the territories regularly, speaking with Omegas and low-rank wolves, ensuring their voices were heard. She established schools and healing centers, created systems of support for those recovering from trauma. And through it all, Azeron was beside her. Her mate, her king, her best friend. They argued and laughed and loved with a passion that never dimmed. The mate bond, that connection forged in fate and fire, remained as strong as the day they'd first touched. On their 10th anniversary as rulers, they stood once more on the balcony overlooking their kingdom. Their children played in the courtyard below, their laughter carrying on the wind. "Do you remember that night?" Aveline asked softly. "When you found me in the forest?" "Every detail," Azeron replied, pulling her close. "I remember thinking that I'd found something impossible, something precious beyond measure." "I remember being terrified," Aveline admitted. "I was so broken, so convinced I was worthless. I couldn't understand why you were looking at me like that." "And now?" "Now I understand." She turned in his arms, looking up at the male who had changed everything. "You didn't see what I'd been made into. You saw what I'd always been beneath the pain and fear. You saw the truth of me before I could see it myself. Azeron's eyes were bright with emotion. You gave me purpose, Aveline. I was a king, but you made me something more. You made me a partner, a father, a male worthy of the crown I wear. We made each other whole, Aveline said, 2 broken pieces finding perfect fit. To another 10 years? Azeron asked, a smile playing at his lips. To forever, Aveline corrected. To ruling side by side until we're old and gray and our grandchildren are running these halls. Forever, Azeron agreed. With you, little wolf, forever doesn't seem long enough. He kissed her then, deep and tender, a kiss that held all the promises they'd made and kept over the years. Below them, their kingdom thrived. Around them, their family laughed. Between them, the mate bond sang its eternal song. Aveline Ashbourne had been an Omega slave, invisible and worthless in the eyes of those who should have protected her. But fate had other plans. The moon, in her infinite wisdom, had brought her an alpha king who saw past her chains to the queen within. Together, they had built something beautiful from the ashes of pain and war. And as the sun set on another day of peace, as stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, they stood together. Not as master and slave, not as Alpha and Omega, but as mates, as partners, as 2 souls who had found their way home. The story of the Omega slave who became a queen would be told for generations. But for Azeron and Aveline, it wasn't a story. It was simply their truth, their love, their life. And it was, in every way that mattered, perfect. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.